Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. And welcome to today's DevOps.com program brought to you by Techstrong, AWS, and PagerDuty. My name is Cody, and I'm the host of Techstrong Learning. We've got an exciting program ahead. First, there are just a couple of housekeeping notes I need to cover. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend. The on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session. If you have any questions, we'd like you to direct those to the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. Over on the right side of the screen, you'll see a couple more options, the first of which will be the chat tab. I'd like you to reserve that for more general comments or maybe good points you hear during our program. And I'd also like you to start warming that up for us now. Let us know from where you're joining. If you jump over to that handouts tab, you'll see there are a couple of resources that have been added for you, so feel free to download those. And of course, before we close out today, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So the title of our program today is Automating Security and Compliance with PagerDuty and AWS. And I'm joined today by Greg Chase, Director of Product Marketing at PagerDuty, and Mark Kriaf, Partner Solutions Architect at AWS. So Greg and Mark, thank you both so much for being here with me. Would you like to take it from here?
Sounds great. Hi, my name is Greg. Mark, go ahead and say hi.
Hi, my name is Mark Kriaf, Partner Solutions Architect at AWS.
And I am Greg Chase, Director of Product Marketing at PagerDuty. Let's get on to our presentation and what we're going to talk about today. So first, we're going to talk about compliance costs and compliance concerns and really hopes and fears about compliance and security in financial services and healthcare. We're going to review some of the regulatory requirements that companies in these industries face. Then we're going to talk about how to build to meet those requirements, both in terms of running workloads on AWS and also in implementing automated IT processes around that. We'll do a quick demo at the end, and then we'll take Q&A. This is a session that's long on concepts, fairly short on demo, but if you're interested, there'll be opportunities for you to get in deeper with our product and the like. So with that, let's jump in. So funny enough, there's tons of stats you can find about financial services moving to cloud and levels of adoption. Less so for healthcare, but I did find this one set of stats that was kind of interesting that kind of shows, roughly speaking, both financial services and healthcare have the same kind of hopes and fears for moving to the cloud. So for example, nearly half are saying that security in the cloud is a top challenge or a top concern for adopting. And then similarly, or at the same time, they are saying that cloud is helping them achieve compliance. They are looking to cloud to save money and also drive operational efficiency. And then they are looking for ways to become more agile and more innovative thanks to using the cloud. So this is from a benchmark report that the consultancy Presidio put out in last August. What's interesting is you don't really have a choice for compliance. And while we can say, I wouldn't say that the technology makes you compliant, it helps you become more compliant. You don't really have a choice. You have to be compliant and you have to be secure. But here's some examples that I've heard from customers about the cost of this compliance. So Standard Chartered Bank was telling us about how when they need to make changes in production, every single one of their sessions has to be recorded, and that's 13,000 sessions a year that are recorded that then have to be watched by managers. And then an Australian bank told us about how when they do their major releases every 3 months, they have to take down the entire bank basically for 40 minutes while they shut down these applications and make their deployments. So that's 40 minutes of downtime every quarter. And then similarly, when they need to do their audits, it was taking 2 to 3 weeks of someone's time to find all the records and put them together. So why do you have these requirements? What's causing this? Well, there's lots of regulatory frameworks, but here's some examples of ones that everybody faces, whether it's SOC 2 or privacy regulations that in the markets that you serve, whether it's Europe or California or what have you. PCI, and if you serve the government, then FedRAMP are just some examples. FinServ and banking are subject to Basel III, and then healthcare has HIPAA and FDA and a collection of other ones as well. What's interesting is if you read through what needs to be done and really what needs to be done from a technical point of view, it kind of boils down to just a few sets of controls. Is you need to make sure that your users are authenticated. In other words, you know who they are. You need to have a clear sense of authorization based on what their job duties are. You need a way to control that access based on that authentication and authorization. And then you need a clear audit trail that says who did what, when, that can then be reproduced and can't be modified by your users. And this fits into also some business practices. And we'll go into this a bit more detail a bit later, but examples of business practices that affect IT and compliance are due diligence, essentially telling the people the changes you want to make and documenting those ahead of time and getting permission and risk assessment. A separation of duties, so people that would, for example, be creating the change to be made are not the same ones that are the ones that would implement the change. And then of course, there's verification about did the change happen and did it achieve the result that you want. So with that, let's get into how to build to meet regulatory requirements. Mark, you want to talk to us about how AWS helps here?
Yes, of course. So let me share my screen quickly. Yeah. So, Greg, as you mentioned, there are several challenges when we talk about being compliant or following some kind of regulatory set of compliance in general and also in the cloud. What I'm going to talk about today is what AWS brings to the table when we talk about how can I secure and meet regulatory compliance in a specific application or a specific use case. So using AWS, you'll gain the control and the confidence you need to securely run your business with the most flexible and secure cloud computing environment available today. Customers can improve their ability to meet core standard and compliance requirements, such as data locality, protection, and confidentiality with our comprehensive services and features. AWS works directly with financial services customers and regulators to enable the secure and compliant adoption of AWS services. One of the main pillars for being secure and compliant on AWS is the shared responsibility model. This shared model can help relieve customer operational burden as AWS operates, manages, and controls the component from the host operating system and virtualization layer down to the physical security of the facilities in which the service operates. The customer assumes responsibility and management of the guest operating system, including updates and security patches, and we'll see which will be a part of our demo later today. Other associated application software, as well as the configuration of AWS provided security groups and firewall. The nature of the shared responsibility also provides a flexibility to the customer to control what exactly happens in their environment. You can see in this chart that there is clear separation between what AWS is in charge of and what the customer is responsible for. With that being said, another pillar of AWS is security as our job zero. It's always the first thing we think about. So AWS gives you various tools and ability and functionality to really have the ability to secure your application in every variation that you need. So from a storage perspective, you choose the AWS region which your content is stored and the type of storage. You can replicate and back up your content in more than one AWS region. We will not move or replicate your content outside your chosen AWS region without your consent, of course, except for cases where it's necessary to comply with laws or other binding government body requests. Security. You choose how your content is secured. We offer you strong encryption for your content in transit and at rest, and we provide you with the option to manage your own encryption keys. These data protection features include data encryption capabilities available in over 100 AWS services, a flexible key management solution using AWS Key Management System, KMS, allowing customers to change whether to have AWS manage their encryption keys or enable customers to manage their own keys separately. Access is another pillar that we want to talk about. As a customer, you maintain full control of your content and responsibility for configuring access to AWS services and resources. We provide an advanced set of access, encryption, and logging features to help you do this. But ultimately, the responsibility falls only for the customer. We provide APIs for you. To configure access control permissions for any of the services you deploy, or for any services you deploy or develop in your AWS environment. Another important pillar that we're going to talk about is disclosure. We will not disclose customer content unless it's required to do so, or to be by law, or to comply with a government order. And this is part of things like a request that comes from governments. This is not something that AWS does just as is. Again, part of it is to maintain this compliance and maintain and give the customers ability to stay compliant with different regulatory bodies. Finally, security assurance. We have developed a security assurance program that uses the best practices for global privacy and data protection to help you operate securely within AWS and to make the best use of our security control environment. This security protections and control processes are independently validated by multiple third-party assessment companies. The AWS cloud infrastructure is designed to help clients meet their compliance, security, and resiliency requirements. Our region is a physical location in the world where we have multiple availability zones. Availability zones, or AZs, consist of one or more discrete data centers, each with redundant power, networking, and connectivity, housed in separate facilities. Availability zone exists on isolated fault lines, floodplains, networks and electrical grids to substantially reduce the chance of simultaneous failure. AZs offer AWS customers an easier and more effective way to design and operate applications and databases, making them more highly available, fault tolerant, and scalable than traditional single data center infrastructure or multi data center infrastructures. We serve millions of customers, more than 245 countries and territories, and we're continuing growing every year. So some of the certifications and regulations that we see customer asking about can be from as mentioned, from the EU, from specific countries, from US governments, and this is a very short list of compliances that are part of the AWS system, and that you can get to using AWS tools and also partner tools. That leads us to the main challenge where we see customer facing. Having the visibility into who made what change from where in real time, and allows organizations to detect misconfigurations and non-compliance and respond quickly to prevent risks from materializing. And with that being said, I will switch back to Greg, who will show us how our AWS partner PagerDuty really helps customers achieve that that level of automation. Greg?
All right, let me switch back to screen share here. All right, so you heard how AWS can help you build and run secure and compliant workloads. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how PagerDuty can help you automate the IT processes around this to optimize security and compliance. So just kind of reviewing how these IT processes work, say for like a change request. So we had talked about due diligence. So if you don't have automation for this, what you're probably doing is having your developers determine what are the sequence of manual steps that need to happen to make a desired change. Whether it's say you're doing a planned event like a deployment of software, or it's an emergency where you're having to pass CVEs or respond to an incident. Either way, you basically have to document all these procedure changes and send it to a due diligence committee or department or management, depending on what how your company does it, in order to get a risk assessment and get this document and get it approved. Through separation of duties, of course, your developers are working in their separate environment, their development or their test environment, to create these procedures, which are then handed over to some third party that does have the ability to access the production environment where they would then execute these steps. Typically, in most companies, I find that this is like a system integrator partner who handles this particular role. And then the development team needs to go and verify, did this change actually happen? Did it achieve what we were looking to achieve? So to automate this, first, you would need a way to automate your procedure steps, turning those, essentially that run book that the development team created and had approved, and turn it into a set of steps that could be orchestrated. And you may, for example, even include approval steps in this. So for this, PagerDuty has a product line called Process Automation that can help you with this. PagerDuty Process Automation provides a web-based environment that lets you do a graphical definition of IT jobs that need to be run. It incorporates plugin integrations with all manner of infrastructure that you would want to call in these jobs, from AWS EC2 capabilities and services to maybe functions related to Kubernetes, such as calling kubectl. Maybe you even have other automation like Jenkins or Ansible or Chef or Puppet or Terraform. And then incorporating these into those step-by-step procedures, even though they may be crossing technical silos. Process automation also includes plugins for your access control and secrets management and logging. And then we also plug into many of the operational applications that IT people use, whether it's PagerDuty for instant response, Slack for chat. So we also do Teams, Jira, working through ServiceNow, or if you want to just be able to log in through the web GUI, or working in the command line. So there are two ways to get process automation. One is a self-hosted option called PagerDuty Process Automation on-prem. We also have a SaaS version we call PagerDuty Runbook Automation. It's essentially the same software, just we host it for you. We'll get into a little more details on that. This is all based on the Rundeck open source project, if you're familiar with Rundeck. And just these are premium features in the commercial distribution. So once you're running process automation and automating your processes through that, we can now incorporate our technical controls into the process. So this would be having the folks who would run those jobs authenticate through your preferred SSO approaches. You would be then controlling their access at the job level through an ACL. That would take into account their specific privileges or their privileges from their role. It will integrate with underlying secrets management and key stores so that you do not need to provide those infrastructure secrets to the user. It will just run it in the context of the job. And then, of course, every job is logged at the job level. So augmenting the logging that Mark was just talking about that AWS provides, we will provide you an even simpler IT process level log, plus all the underlying step information. So this really simplifies how to collect the information of who did what through standardized jobs. Now that we have this automation ability available to us, we can optimize how we do change requests. So now, instead of having our developers working on cookbooks of how to make changes, they can create reusable automation. And this reusable automation can really simplify the due diligence step, because you can actually have these common operations pre-built and pre-reviewed before you need them, so that when you go and tell the due diligence committee, I need to run job 4 with the following parameters, they understand what's going to happen, and it can really speed up that step. So then you would then provide your partner the automation to run and execute there. And so now they're not doing manual steps, they're just executing a tested automation that then this will allow you to reduce errors and reduce the time spent to implement these changes. And then similarly, you can automate the verification steps so that your developers are a lot more productive as well. So that's the kind of how we optimize the process side, but let me talk about how we can simplify security. The simplest way to deploy this automation is hosted within your production environment. And that might be fine, but really what we want to do is separation of concerns or separation of duties. And also, I mean, frankly speaking, if you're a big company, you have multiple environments. So another way to do this is to maybe have a centralized self-hosted environment with the process automation running within it, that then will connect to remote VPCs that where production actually lives. And you can think of it as there's really 2 approaches to do this. One, we do integrate with AWS SSM, so you can take advantage of that feature and communicate through the workflows that are executing in the self-hosted environment in steps back there. Or you can use our own agent, which we call a runner, which is built for zero trust environments, and I'll get into more details there. Or if you want to work with the SaaS, it's a fairly similar approach on the production side, but here we're running the environment for you. It otherwise feels the same as if you're self-hosting from the developer and execution experience, because it's all the same web-based environment. It's just that we're doing the care and feeding of the actual servers for you. The other kind of extra feature you get with the SaaS is we provide a public endpoint that makes it easy to incorporate third-party SaaS services that we all use. And you can use that as a way to incorporate those into these orchestrated jobs as well. And so if this secure endpoint is a feature that a lot of our customers like, so they don't have to run one themselves. And so as a result, this is built for zero trust. It's built for environments that have severely locked down access. Maybe you're blocking SSH, and it saves you the trouble of having to build your own jump box or bastion host. A little bit more about connecting SaaS with self-hosted. So in the DevOps world, we use a whole lot of different SaaS tools and services that maybe are, if you kind of blow out your process, in terms of what you need to do, is not just making a change in the service. You also need to respond to the ticket, log the results on Jira, those kinds of things. So why not automate those steps as well? So this is where the public endpoint can be highly valuable, and so you can incorporate these steps into that automation and save yourself yet some more IT time. A little bit about our runner option for connecting the prod. This is how it works. So this is your this would be the runner installed inside your production remote VPC. These would be the nodes, for example, that you might be managing or making changes to on a workflow step, and then this would be either your self-hosted automation environment, or this would be the automation environment running on the SaaS. So it's a callback mechanism. So it calls back through standard HTTPS port to the endpoint of the centralized environment and asks, is there any work to do? If there is a workflow executing that relates to the nodes on this remote server, it will see what steps need to be executed. We'll then execute the steps locally and then return the results. So you can kind of see how this will make your CISO smile. Some use cases for this. You can standardize your incident processes, your diagnostics, your mitigations, your remediations, and Standard Chartered Bank, for example, by having the jobs built and pre-approved to run, and executions logged for auditors are able to save 28 people years worth of work. You can optimize your deployments and speed up patching, which means that your software evolves faster and letting you innovate faster. And so here, for example, Change Healthcare, an online imaging SaaS company, is able to satisfy the change control requirements for medical devices required by the FDA. And our friends at the Australian Bank are telling us that they're able to achieve 500 to 600 different change deployments a month now. And this is because it's taking 85% less time. They're saving 30 minutes per deployment, or even up to 250 hours of an engineer's time per month. And then, of course, auditing is a fact of life, but we can do this a lot faster if we've got a simplified record keeping and log system. So now they're able to provide audit data in less than a day instead of somebody having to toil away for 2 to 3 weeks. And then, of course, we're improving the quality of operations since we're eliminating manual steps here. And Standard Chartered Bank told us that by doing this, they reduced 200 self-inflicted errors per year. So with that, let's take a look at what this can look like. So let me switch to the video here. My colleague Ranjana built this real quick demo showing what a change request might look like.
In this demo, we'll look at how Sunray Financial has incorporated process automation into their deployment process to improve efficiency and save time. When a planned change needs to be made at Sunray Financial, it goes through the necessary request process internally until an approval is received. In this due diligence phase, the environment is highly regulated. The development team works on their own infrastructure that mirrors prod to identify what the changes are that need to happen and what the sequence of processes are to make that change. Let us take this example job to deploy and patch new database infrastructure that was created by my dev team. The job here is going to take advantage of 2 direct integrations we have in the system. In section 1, we're going to call Terraform to create a new instance inside AWS EC2. It's going to do that with some values that we'll enter as well as some defaults which have been specified. Section 2 of the job is going to use Ansible to patch the new instance and then add that new instance as a node within our automation interface. All of that will now run from this job. Now, the developers themselves are not allowed to make the change in prod. This needs to be passed along to the systems integrator, or SI, with the sequence of steps, and they implement the process that the dev team has created. This is where the separation of concerns comes into play. Now let us assume that the change request approval came through and we have the change request ID to include as part of the job to deploy and patch new database infrastructure. I'll switch hats to that of an SI now with the permissions to run this job. Before we run the job itself, here's the definition. We can see there are 5 steps that will be carried out. First, there's a batch job that is using Terraform to build EC2, and then we sleep to give it some time to build. Third, we get information from the AWS CLI about this new instance, so we can report the information back in our logs and utilize it later in the job. The fourth step uses Ansible and the information we gathered about that node for patching. We'll then refresh the project nodes as part of what Ansible was doing in 4, and the new machine should now show up as a node that we'll have available to us. Let's run this job now. As most automation jobs do, this requires a few inputs from us. First, we give it a name here that it will be given in EC2, and we'll also use it to describe it here in the automation interface. We can then pick any of the available instance sizes. Then we'll enter the change request sysID. Let us run this job now and then review the logs to see what we'll get back from the system. The initial phase we'll be looking at Terraform. The speed of build will depend on the AMI we're using and the instance size. Now, we're at the Ansible portion of our job. We add an Ansible playbook from a repository in GitHub, and then we run that playbook here. We gather information about the machine that has been added. Then we go ahead and update the repo in the box itself. Then we update the packages and check if there's a reboot. Then we reboot. Now it's going to add that machine to the inventory and we have a working machine. In this example, we're adding a database machine. It could be individual single machines. It could be clusters of machines as part of an application, and so on.
All right, thank you to Ranjana for that. So as you can see, it's fairly simple concepts, and it seems to be fairly simple in terms of the implementation of this automation. What's really happening here, though, is you've got an any-to-any automation orchestration platform available to you that's allowing you to create these end-to-end IT jobs that span across what would normally have been silos in the IT organization based on access capabilities or based on expertise or based on knowledge of tooling. So this is the value that process automation is providing for you here, and then allowing you to implement these practices and add these controls to this IT or business process level to simplify your or optimize your compliance and simplify the security that we all need to achieve anyways. So with that, if you want to learn more, I invite you to check out the overview of PagerDuty Process Automation on PagerDuty.com. You'll find more descriptions of the platform, options, and lots of information there. If you want to see a more in-depth demo, maybe tuned to the kinds of things you're trying to do, I invite you to request a demo from our field team. We also have a hands-on workshop using the SaaS version of process or runbook automation, so that you can kind of see how to work with process automation with AWS. And lastly, you can find process automation on the AWS workshop as well. So I think we're now at the point where we take questions.
Yeah, that's actually, I want to add one more thing to your point before that, Greg. You mentioned the beauty of what process automation does is it simplifies all the small things that we need to do in order to have an end-to-end flow when we talk about security and compliance. So as you mentioned ITs. We have a lot of tools today that are available to do a very specific task. Where process automation shines is it brings all these tools together, which can be from different vendors, different locations also, it brings it all together into into a cohesive flow, and really helps with reducing the friction when we talk about all the internal red tape that sometimes we have within teams, and access restrictions and things like that, without compromising security. So that's a very great point about this tools.
Thank you, Mark. And I think it's also important to say is that part of this automation is also the simplification of a process. So somebody may not be an Ansible or Terraform expert, but they can understand Go, and they can understand a problem response. So you don't need to. You can basically deleverage your level 4 experts to be able to focus on things like creating automation or work on the hard problems instead of the repetitive everyday scenarios that typically come up.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Cool.
Do we have any questions here?
Yeah, I see we have a couple of questions. I'll start with does process automation work with CloudWatch and CloudTrail? So yes. Go ahead.
Yes, it does. Yes,
Yeah.
it does. We have integrations with many AWS services. So we will be able to query logs. We'll be able to post logs. So yeah, very tightly integrated with many of the AWS services.
Okay. And what about the PagerDuty Incident Manager? Can we plug it into process automation?
We can. In one of the earlier, so if I have a diagram handy that I can go back to. Okay. Okay, this is probably a reasonable point here. So you've got a little P icon. We're talking about PagerDuty incident response there. It can be one of the interfaces that your operations user might be working through. So they might be, for example, responding to an incident in PagerDuty, and there's integrations there where they can access automated jobs that do things like diagnose problems inside production, or run a mitigation, for example.
Mm-hmm. Ah, cool. That's a very important part. Notifications, and making sure everybody that should be aware of a change is aware of a change. And with that, we can move to another question around that. So, what are some tips around how to automate approval flows that you can share?
Well, let's see. I think I had another example in here that basically illustrated. For example, you can have an approval step, such as a step that might be as part of your Jira or part of your service. Now, that's like the most basic, simple way. So then, if like maybe you have simple a workflow that is recognized as low risk, that could be a due diligence step right there that's incorporated into the flow. For something that's more serious, though, you're probably going to do that due diligence as a offline process, but at the same time, you're still making it go faster because you've got a reasonable set of automation libraries as opposed to a brand new cookbook that somebody has to read through in detail.
Yeah, and we can also leverage tools like you mentioned, Slack and Teams, to make sure that we notify the correct people so they can have a look at the approval if we need a manual intervention there.
I would make one clear thing though, is that process automation is really about end-to-end jobs that run in privileged and with privileged operations, maybe across environments. While it can do things like this approval step, it's not really meant to have a lot of interactive human interfaces. The idea is that between the human steps, even if it's several silos you have to cross with some procedural steps, it will cover that whole thing for you automatically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's not like a just wait for approval and wait forever kind of situation. Yeah. And finally, hybrid environments. Can a flow that we saw here in the demo, can it work on if we have a hybrid environment like on-prem and AWS or something similar to that?
It can. So it can, the steps can range across a variety of infrastructures and capabilities. So you might have something that does work in, say, your AWS development environment, and then if you have steps that need to occur in a, say, like you have an on-premise hosted environment, that it could then execute steps on that one as well. So maybe you're building and then pushing a deploy to prod, for example.
Nice. Yeah, so cool. That's all the questions that I see right now. If we have, if someone has more questions, please feel free to send them in. And yeah, as Greg mentioned, we have this amazing workshop that we built together where you can have some hands-on experience and try everything we talked about here on your own time, on your own environment, without having to, to do any kind of requests or things like that. So it's open and free, so you can use one of the links in the handouts. And also, yeah, please make sure to go to the overview of PagerDuty Process Automation on PagerDuty.com to really get into the details of all the wide range of abilities that process automation has, and what kind of to get some ideas of what kind of flows process automation can help you with at automating, essentially. Greg, anything else you want to add?
No, just the hands-on workshop was really fun, and just remember to turn off that NAT gateway when you're taking a pause, because that thing's kind of expensive.
Yes. That's a very good point, and we mentioned it in a workshop. Yes, yeah. Clean after yourself after all the infrastructure that you deploy, for sure.
All right. Well, Mark and Greg, since we are out of questions, I do just want to reiterate to our audience one more time that if you check out that handouts tab, you'll find all 4 of these resources. So feel free to grab those before we close out. So I'd like to remind our audience that today's session was recorded. Should you want to rewatch, you will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand. Or, of course, you can find it living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars. The 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing are Amruth M, Anna C, Doug T, and Aparna H. So to our 4 winners, please keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. It should arrive within the next 48 hours. Otherwise, do check your spam folder in case it does get filtered out. Just wanted to make sure we are out of questions. Perfect. You guys exhausted everything. Do you have anything else before we close out, Mark?
No, none from my side.
Perfect. Well, then in that case, I'd like to thank AWS and PagerDuty for sponsoring our program today. And to everyone who's joined us, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time, and we also really appreciate your feedback. As soon as we close out, there will be a survey that pops up. Let us know what you thought about our program today, or maybe what you'd like to see on an upcoming program. Otherwise, we do hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and Greg, Mark, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.